Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for episode 18 of the Grit Podcast with Pete Ciotti. Today, my guest is Austin Newblom. How are you, bud?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me out here.
3,000 feet of coaching right across from me here today.
All 3,000 feet.
Awesome. Austin, man, let's get into it. So let's start with, so you were a firefighter for many years.
Yep.
For
For about 10 or 11 years, I was
Oh, wow.
all-down firefighter.
I didn't realize 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And recently you kind of retired?
I wouldn't say retired, but transitioned to a different career. Yeah.
Good word. Transitioned into
online run coaching. So one-on-one run coaching. It's all done online.
Yeah.
It's funny because I got into running through firefighting, right? Just to stay in shape. And then I sort of got out of firefighting to get more into running.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
A little ironic with that, but yeah.
And you started your own business. It's like you got a whole thing going. You got branding, obviously. You got your hat and your shirts and your website.
Yeah, I was doing it on the side for a handful of years, but with firefighting and that, it just became there was a point where it was like, all right, I got to choose one or the other. And firefighting, it was a great career while I had it. Super, props to all wildland firefighters out there. Huge sacrifices they make every year. But it was just getting too much being 2 states away from my wife for half the year and just not having the freedom to live like a summer. Like I've never had a summer in the last 10 years. The last decade I haven't done summertime activities. And so it kind of it became too much for me. And I was like, well, I can, try out the coaching thing full time and see how that goes. And it's been going great. So I'm really happy with that move.
That's awesome. So, I mean, did you have a little bit of fear, anxiety getting into it? Like, hey, well, how am I going to get clients? What am I going to do starting from ground zero?
I mean, a little bit. I was coaching on the side for several years. And so that aspect of it wasn't new. But the fact that it was like, all right, I'm leaving my full-time job firefighting to do this, that's kind of scary. But so far everything's been super positive.
Nice.
I can't be happier with that move. It's just, like I said, the firefighting takes a lot out of you, and this gives me the flexibility and the freedom to do my own training, to be with my family more, to be with my wife, and to, make the decisions throughout the summertime that I want to make, as opposed to, kind of being told what to do all summer.
That's so awesome, man. Good for you too, just taking that leap, Like sometimes you're like, ooh, I don't know, going from like a real solid career like that into moving into something that's just kind of can be an unknown at first.
I think it helps too. Like, I left on good terms. I could always go back to that. I could always go to like Structure Fire Department, Cal Fire, or something like that. So the fact that I have that as a fallback option is really nice. Kind of provides that security that, could be missing in a case like this. But so far, everything is all in on run coaching, and I'm really happy with that.
That's awesome. So you're coaching running, but you're also an ultra runner, and you've run quite a few races over the last few years, and you've got some real big goals coming up this year, which we're going to touch on in a second. You just ran a 100-miler that you finished 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was actually a week ago on Saturday.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Let's dive into that. So, what was the race?
Yeah, so that was Canyons 100-miler down in Auburn. It's put on by UTMB, and it's essentially parts of it are on the Western States course. So, Western States runs from Truckee to Auburn, and that back half of the course that runs through all the canyons, they sort of utilize that section and then a few other loops here and there to make up 100 miles. And then the finish line's in downtown Auburn, and so a lot of elevation gain, a lot of elevation loss. 100-mile race. It's definitely not forgiving.
Yeah.
It was a fun one. It was definitely, like I was telling you before we started recording, out of all the races I've done, this one probably beat me up the most. And, it's my own fault for that. Part of that being, going out a little too hard. Part of it being not being as prepared for all the downhill running in this race. The terrain we've got around here is, there's some hills, but it's not anything like the canyons there.
Yeah.
Where you're running through technical terrain, lots of downhill for 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 feet at a time, as opposed to here you can get maybe 900 at a time in the community forest.
Yeah.
So a few of those factors added up, but I'd say mostly the part about going out a little too fast hit me real hard.
Really?
And so I've, obviously in any 100 miler, you're going to have a bunch of muscle damage, bunch of like soreness late into the race. And I've had that in previous races where I've gone out a little bit too fast and had that. And it's caused me to actually drop out of the race before at like mile 60. This time I'm like, hey, no matter what happens, I'm going to make it to that finish line. And by the time I got to the finish line, the muscle pain and the muscle soreness from this race is worse than it had been in any other race I'd
Mm,
done, just because it going
yeah.
slightly too hard on the beginning of the race.
When you said you went out hard, like how many miles did you go hard and then realize, oh, I got to slow down?
And so hard is like it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like you're going out that fast because it's
Yeah. Well,
pretty
yeah.
pretty mellow pace. But so that's interesting with this race. It's something I've never seen before. In the start corral, they had like a separate section for anyone that wants to compete versus anyone that's just there to run it. And so they're like, hey, self select if you're competing for top 20 male or female, start in the front corral, and then everyone else is kind of going to be funneled out. And so I guess it makes it easier so that way not everyone's on the single track all at once. So they kind of like started in waves of like a minute or two. But they're like, hey, if you want a chance to compete for, one of the top spots, then you need to start in this front group. So I'm like, okay. And we get there and they start the race, which is right at noon on Friday. And that whole front group like takes off like 6-minute miles. I was like, oh my
So you're
goodness.
just pacing with them.
Well, for a few steps, and
Trying.
I was like, this is dumb. Like this is
Dang.
way too fast. And I mean, I'd say probably 70% of them kept that pace. And then the others, like the other 30%, like kind of dropped back like me, like, hey, this is a little too much.
You
Um,
mean kept that pace the whole
no,
for a
no,
while?
just like the first,
Yeah.
mile,
Okay.
2 miles
Yeah.
until they're
Yeah.
all out of
Okay.
sight.
Yeah.
Um, but then, having that kind of a start to a race,
Hmm.
now you're like that shifts your mindset a little bit because now you're just like, holy cow, like things are going,
Yeah.
as opposed to like having a nice, mellow, relaxed start where you can just ease into it.
Yeah.
And so, like, the whole time, I knew that front group was out there ahead of me. And I'm like, I know I can, on a good day, I can hang with some of them. Maybe not, win the race or anything like that, but I know I can get top 10 on a good day.
Hmm.
And so having that thought of they're always out there ahead of me kind of like pushes you to go just a little bit harder than you
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
should be
Yeah. Yeah.
going for a while. And so I think it was like about mile 20 coming into that first aid station that I see crew at, which Sarah, my wife, is my crew.
Yeah.
She's
Shout out.
yeah, couldn't do it without her. She's awesome. But coming into that aid station, I could already feel the soreness in my quads starting to develop, and I've done enough of these races to know that if I'm feeling this way at mile 20, it's not good news for the rest
Yeah.
of the race.
So what do you do? Like you're okay. So you're coming into the aid station with Sarah at mile 20, and your quads are just burning. Like, what do you do to kind of like temper down and just embrace yourself for 80 more miles with
I
that
mean,
pain?
at that point, you gotta have to modulate your effort level, right?
Mm.
One thing I always tell athletes I'm coaching is, there's so many things you can undo in a race setting, right? If you get dehydrated, you can stop at an aid station, get rehydrated. If you forget to eat, you can stop at an aid station, you can stop, fuel up. Blisters, you can take care of those. The one thing you can't undo in
Yeah.
that duration of the time, like of a race, is muscle damage.
Yeah.
And so once you've accumulated muscle damage, like it's like, all right, you're gonna have to deal with it for the rest of the race.
Yeah.
And like I've said in previous races, it's a lot easier said than done
Yeah.
going out at the right intensity. But in previous races, I've had this happen, once or twice before, and it's taken me out of a race at mile 60 once before. And so I kind of had that foresight, like, hey, this is going to be bad, knowing how this feels already. And I just kept it easier and easier, like throughout the rest of the race. By the time I hit that mile 60, I was in better shape than that other race that I had to DNF from. But I still knew that last 40 miles was not going to be fun. And,
Yeah.
and I ended up walking in like the last 25 miles because of that. So,
Really? Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It got to a point where, I mean, I had something going on with the calf, quads, like everything just kind of stopped working. And it's
Stuff.
like, yeah, I tried to run a little bit here and there towards the end of the race, but it's like you can't undo muscle damage, like I was saying. So
So you basically had to walk in a marathon pace or a marathon effort all the way back.
yeah, that
And
last
walking is hard to do when you're in that kind of pain because not only because, you got to walk it off for so long, but like it's also like mentally going so much slower that you're just in that pain cave for much longer than you would be if you were running it,
Yeah,
in a way. It's
exactly, and
weird.
it is weird, and it's like, at this point in the race, I already knew that my chances of any of the goals I had going into it were out the window.
Yeah.
Now it's just about finishing, um, but I'm, like, cruising along, I'm like, "Hey, if I go, like, 4 miles an hour, so if I do, like,
Mhm.
15-minute pace on average, I can hit 24 hours," and very shortly into, like,
Right.
a few miles of doing that, I'm like, "There's no way," because 'cause I'm pushing, like, 3 miles an hour at this point,
Yeah.
just crawling along, and so
Yeah.
I was like, "All right, look at the watch. How long do I think it'll take me to go the rest of the race with, at 3 miles an hour?" And it's like, "Okay, that could take, like, 5 or 6 hours." And then you go, like, a couple miles, and then you look down, and you're like, "Man, what kind of pace am I going out now?" And you're
Yeah.
like, it's still at 5 or 6 hours, like,
Yeah,
out."
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
telling Sarah at the end of it, it's like, when you're at the end of a race like that, you're just trying to finish at this point, you're kinda, like, stuck in that vortex if you keep thinking about it, like, when is the race gonna end? I can continue doing what I'm doing forever, it just sucks, but it's like, "Alright, is it 5 hours out? Is it 8 hours out?" And then every time you, like, recalculate it, it seems like it's getting further away instead of closer.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But, I mean, you just gotta keep going and then
Yeah.
eventually cross the line and then deal with
That's
it
just
afterwards,
that's
so
just it. It's as simple as that, right?
yeah.
Simpler said than done. So pivoting a little bit here, Austin. So you've run. This wasn't your first, obviously your first 100. You've done how many long 100 plus races
So
at this point?
I've started, I think, 4 or 500s.
Hmm.
This is my second 100-mile finish,
Okay.
and then I've done Cocodona 250 back
Yeah,
in
which started
2023.
today, right? I
Yeah,
believe
actually, today is
Cocodona started
Cocodona
today.
Day,
Yeah.
so I
Right.
was watching the live stream a little bit this
Yeah,
morning.
totally. That's wild. For those of you who don't know, Cocodona 250 is in Arizona. It's a 250-mile race, and it started today, and it's a like 5 or 6 day
Yeah,
event.
5
Yeah,
day, 125-hour cutoff.
right. And
Awesome race
yeah,
if you ever get the
I
chance,
mean,
like
yeah, what an opportunity. Let's stay there for a second. So, how was it something you just pursued, or like how did it fall into place? Because I know that race, especially today, is like it's an expensive race to enter. There's a lot of times it's lottery based, I think.
No, yeah, so a lot of the bigger races like that are lottery based, but the
Mhm.
one thing about Cocodona that's neat is it's not. So it's just
Oh, it's not? Okay.
first come, first serve. As soon as registration opens, like, sign up, and
Yeah.
then, if you're on the list, great. If not, you might be on a wait list.
Mhm.
It kinda caused some issues last year because they opened registration during the race. So a lot of the athletes that were in the race were like, "We have to register while we're running currently for next year's edition."
Oh, wow,
And
that's
so,
weird.
yeah, so they bumped it out this year. Um but kind of the story on the Cocodona for me was, so as career as a wildland firefighter, my dream was to be a smoke jumper. And I got there and I became a smoke jumper back in 2021.
Awesome.
I finished that and maintained that job for the several years
Mhm.
towards the end of my fire career there. And after completing rookie training, which is like this 5-week, really rigorous, difficult training regimen where they teach firefighters how to parachute essentially. So there's not really any firefighting training, it's just parachute school. And it's super rigorous. It's like, I think it's a 40% washout rate. So only 60% of people make it through, whether that's because they quit or they didn't, complete one of the technical skills, like they
Mhm.
couldn't figure out how to fly a parachute or hook up the gear correctly.
Oh, wow.
Various reasons that people don't make it through. And so after completing that, which was something that I had been working towards for like 7 years, there's
Wow.
kinda like, all right, like this was the big thing that my big goal was, and I've done it. And so now it's like, what kind of big thing can I
Yeah.
look at next? And
Okay.
one of the guys that I was actually working with down there was like, "Hey, have you seen this race? It's called Cocodona." And it was like this time of year again in
Mhm.
May. And I think this was the inaugural one that he was showing me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I've never heard of it." And then that just sort of planted that seed, and then, like, a year or 2 years later, I was like, "Hey, I'm signing up for that race." Like,
So wait, you
it's
had never run anything close to that beforehand,
I'd
or
run 100 I ran a 100-miler before.
okay,
I finished my first
you
100-miler
did,
the
okay.
same year that I graduated from rookie training and
Okay, okay.
with the smoke jumping. So,
So you
um,
had a 100-mile under your belt, 1,
one DNF, one 100-mile finish, and then, like, a 50K, I think,
but
and
that's just a huge jump from 100 to 250 is a huge jump.
oh, yeah, it is a big jump, but I think if you've finished 100 and you're capable of that,
Right.
there's not a whole lot different with a 250 or 200-mile race other than way more logistics, way
Right.
more planning,
Right.
way more strategy, right? Like the
Mindset.
physical
Yeah.
fitness, like the training doesn't double, right? If you're running
Mhm.
60 miles a week for 100, you're not going to run 120 miles a week for a 200.
Right.
It's like maybe you'll run a little bit more, um, but you're not going to necessarily double that training. And so with that, it's like I'd done 100 before. It's still a big jump, but you're running much slower because it's a longer race. And so most even more like how much hiking you do in a 100 miler, there's even more hiking in a 200 miler. And so really they've done studies with this, like checking the creatine kinase muscle markers for
Mm.
muscle damage at the end of a 100-mile race versus a 200.
Yeah.
And it's actually elevated more after a 100-mile race for a lot of runners than the 200s because just the intensity is that much higher,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
So, and it goes to show because like this last race, Canyons, a few of the other hundreds I've done, I've had a lot higher muscle soreness after the race than Cocodona, right? That race, I had almost no muscle damage, no muscle soreness, which was crazy. Joints were stiff, really stiff,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, but muscle soreness compared to like the hundreds is very minimal in my opinion, at least with the intensity you're going.
And let's stay on that topic for a second. So, like, when you get done with like a race like Cocodona or even a 100 miler, but let's stay on Cocodona for a second. Uh, you have to be really patient at the end and like with your recovery. I mean, you're talking like weeks of recovery coming
Yeah,
home,
I
or
mean,
like,
even a 100-mile, even a marathon, right? Like it depends on how you approach the race, right? If
mhm,
you're just approaching it as a casual run versus like you're pushing your body to its limits,
yeah,
um, it takes a lot longer than people think to recover from these races. And one of the biggest things you'll learn in ultra running is like patience pays off, right?
hmm,
Whether it's in the race, like for me, I should have been a lot more patient in canyons to have gone out slower and just let the race come to me at my own pace. But um, same thing happens like after a race, right? You got to be super, super patient, let your body recover. And it's
yeah,
not just the musculoskeletal system, it's not just the muscles, tendons, ligaments. It's not just your aerobic system, which, like, after Cocodona, I think I had pneumonia or something and like coughing up phlegm for a couple days. It was pretty gnarly.
from the dust in the desert or what?
Yeah, I mean, you're just
Different environment.
inhaling dust a
Oh
ton.
God, yeah,
Your immune system shot after something like this,
yeah,
so
totally.
you're really susceptible to illnesses, to viruses and things like that. Um, and so it's not just those things, but it's also like recovering your immune system, recovering your nervous system, like heart rate variability. I'm not sure if you like track that much or
Yeah,
anything, but
yeah, totally.
like even once your body feels recovered, your heart rate variability is likely still depressed for 2-3 weeks after a race like.
Wow.
And so it's just making sure all these systems in your body are back to baseline before you like get
Hmm.
back into hard training,
Yeah.
right? Because that's one thing I see far too often with athletes is that they'll race and then like a week later they're back to doing like big runs, big long runs, or maybe they're doing a race every other weekend, and it'll take a toll on your body if you're not
Mhm.
letting it recover and if you're not letting your system get back to normal. And it's like, it's not just about what you can do, right? Like,
Mhm.
sure, maybe a week after a race, you can go out and you can push like a real hard effort or a real long run, but you're not going to actually absorb that training if your body's not recovered
No.
from the previous race. So,
Yeah, I think like, recovery needs to at that point, recovery needs to be part of your discipline. I think what a lot of people rush back on things because they're so disciplined in their training. They're like, I train every day. It's just part of my DNA. It's what I do every day. But recovery also needs to be a part of that training
exactly.
too.
Yeah.
They're
Like,
like one and the same, really. A lot of people are just like, it's train, 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 and oh yeah, now I'm gonna take this day off. It's not a day off. It's actually part of the training.
yep.
Recovering is part of the training.
No, 100%.
Biggest
Like,
thing I learned from working with you, as you've been coaching me, is like just learning how to like, it says rest day on the schedule, but that doesn't simply mean okay, just like there's things called active recovery, right?
mhm.
I want you to touch on that a little bit. Just like what is active recovery? What does that mean? Active recovery. It kind of sounds like two different things.
Yeah, it's kind of oxymoron
Right,
there, but
oxymoron.
I mean, a rest day or a recovery day, it simply means you want to end that day in a better position to perform than you started that day.
Mm,
And so if it can be, depending on the athlete, it can be any number of things. Some athletes need complete rest. They need, depending on their condition, complete rest, absolutely nothing. But if, say you go out for an hour walk or you go for like a light swim and that is not really stressing your body and you finish that day, you're keeping the blood flowing, you finish that day more recovered, more prepared to attack, the next day's workout than you started that day, then it can count as a recovery day, right? And so same thing goes with running. Like there's recovery runs, which are they're intended to, for one, build up time on your feet and, continue building that time at that low intensity, but it's also intended to get you ready and get you primed for the next like hard effort that you're doing or next long run or something.
Totally.
And so like active recovery it's really subjective depending on the situation, but it can be anything. As long as, you do have that structure within your week or your training where, you have the days that are more intense and more taxing on the body and then the days that you can recover from them and bounce back. And like you're saying, it needs to be a part of your training, right? It needs to
Yeah.
be a part of your discipline. Like this day is a rest day or this day is a recovery day. And I'm going to stick to that. Cause if you go out and you're supposed to do a 30-minute recovery run, but you go out and you push an hour at like a moderate effort,
Hmm.
well, you're not going to get the benefit of that recovery. And, you need two things for adaptation to happen in any training context, whether it's lifting weights,
Sure.
running. You need the stressor, the stimulus, and then you need the recovery. Without either one of those,
Hmm.
you know, the adaptation won't happen. And if like I like to say, if you're not recovering, you're probably injuring yourself because,
Mm.
right? The opposite
Yeah.
of if your body's not recovering, it's just getting more and more broken down, and eventually that becomes an injury.
That's so
Um,
true. That's so good. Yeah, as you know, I ran a little marathon effort in the Bay Area on Saturday, and then so yesterday was Sunday, and my active recovery was golfing. I haven't golfed in like years, and my son, who's 17, and his other buddy were like, they just recently found golfing as a fun thing to do. So like, let Dad, we take us golfing? Sure, no problem. Man, they're hacking. I thought I was pretty bad. I used to play a lot when I was in high school and stuff, but I haven't played in like 10 years.
yeah,
But I tracked it on my watch, I got, like, 3 miles of walking around with the clubs. It was a good active recovery, but it wasn't, like, strenuous, it wasn't super hard, and, you can make active recovery fun, I've learned, there's all these fun little activities that I get into, like, pickleball has been fun, Try
hmm
not to stress it too hard even though it can get a little it's supposed to be fun,
yeah,
golfing's supposed to be fun, people, but some people go out there and they're chucking clubs and they're getting all mad, that's not me, but, it's just fun to be out in the sun and walk around and, definitely stay hydrated when you're doing it. But yoga's another one, golfing, pickleball, maybe lightly shooting hoops, but not playing full on basketball.
yeah,
Simple things like
yeah. I
that
mean,
that can be fun, and you can just bake them right into to what you're doing.
yeah, and as long as it's not like, you go out and you play pickleball or something and then you roll an ankle, like
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
opposite of what you want, but as long as it's light and you're, like I said, if you're feeling like you're more recovered after the day than like the start of the day, then
yeah.
it's a good note,
You got to be careful with that pickleball too, because you go people. There's like a lot. People think it's like this sport that like all these old people are doing. No, it's not true. It's like a cross between like ping pong and tennis, but people can go pretty hard in the pickleball circuit.
Oh yeah,
Especially here in Humboldt. So you got to be
pickleball
careful.
is a big part of smoke jumper culture. There's
Is it really?
pickleball courts at like all the outstations.
Oh no way.
You're waiting there for a fire. You're sitting at
Hmm.
an airport just waiting, right? And like after you've refurbed all the parachutes and you've done like all the things to get ready, after the last fire you got on, there's a lot of downtime,
Yeah,
and so. Jumpers will play pickleball
yeah.
occasionally, pass some of that downtime, play cards, some things like that.
That's
So,
cool. One of the biggest things I did learn, I got injured in November. I had an IT band that crept into like kind of like runner's knee, and and I had to take like a month off or so. And two things. I learned that I had to be patient. That was really hard. There was a lot of FOMO going on. Everyone's out there on Strava, doing these runs and having fun, and I had to lay back and just not get out there. And but I found swimming to be just amazing. Like somebody recommended swimming. They're like, "Oh, swim, dude." I was like, "Swim? I don't know." But once I got out there, or got in the pool and just started moving around and swimming, yeah, it's just the flow of it was just amazing. Totally healed me,
oh,
and now I
it's
love swimming. And now I'm like super hooked on it. Anytime I can swim. I try to get in the pool. It's super fun. Um, but just like, stretching, yoga, swimming, just stuff where you're just light on your feet. And, obviously sometimes you just need to rest too. Like, if we could talk a little bit about sleep and how important
Mhm.
that is as an ultra runner.
Yeah, I mean, sleep is it's the number one tool you have for recovery, right? Like you can do all the fancy stuff, the Normatec boots, the, red lights, like
Mhm.
you can do all these fancy things, but nothing compares to just getting good sleep,
Mhm.
right? Getting good sleep, eating enough food. If you're under fueling your body, if you're not eating enough and you're not getting sleep and you need sleep quality and quantity.
Mhm.
Those are like the biggest bang for your buck in terms of recovery. Um, I was actually it's funny you bring that up because my wife and I was struggling with, like, waking up in the middle of the
Mm.
night super hot and,
Mhm.
just not getting very good sleep, and it was
Mhm.
taking a toll on my training
Totally.
and just my mental status, right? Like,
Mhm.
in the morning, just not being able to think clearly,
Yeah.
and, my wife and I, we were kinda both dealing with these problems, and so we're like, "Hey, let's see if there's anything out there." And we actually got this thing, which it's not cheap by any means, but it's called 8 Sleep.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And it's like a mattress cover that
That
goes over your
tracks everything.
mattress, and it circulates like cool water within the mattress cover
Oh,
to
okay.
keep you cool. And it's really fascinating because the difference in like the quality of sleep that I got before having that versus having that on the mattress is night and day. Like,
Really?
I'm not waking up in the middle of the night just drenched in sweat and struggling to fall back asleep anymore. It's like I'm actually getting good quality sleep, and it's crazy like how well you feel training day to day and recovering from that when
Oh,
you're
no
actually
way.
sleeping well.
Huh. Yeah, I've
So,
heard about it on, like, the Huberman Lab podcast, and some other podcasters have talked about that.
yeah, it's not I think it's definitely not cheap by any means,
Yeah.
but it is worth every penny of it. Because I mean, you
Mm.
think about it, if you're, like, having a good mattress, good pillow, good sleeping setup, you're in bed for 7 to 9 hours a
Yeah,
night, right?
totally.
Like,
A third of your life.
that's a third of your life. Like,
Right.
if you're gonna spend some money on things, like, instead of buying, like, any of the other recovery gadgets, invest in your sleep. Like,
That's a huge
it will
investment.
pay
Totally.
dividends because you're in your bed so much of your life, like,
Yep.
you might as well make the most of it.
So a good night's sleep is, for you, would say, is, like, between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Eh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, I feel best when I'm closer to that 9, depending
Mhm.
on my training volume. If, like, my
Yeah.
training volume's lower or I'm kind of, in the off season, I can get by with 6, 7 hours and
Mhm.
feel fine. But once I start pushing that training volume and pulling that, lever to try to make the most of my training, then yeah, I do best closer to 9.
When do you usually wake up? Like,
It
what's your typical day? Is it usually, structured out and scheduled the same,
Yeah, I
more
mean,
or
for
less?
the most
Okay.
part. So I'll wake up either 1 of 2 times. I'll wake up at like 5:30 when my wife wakes up for getting ready for her work.
Mhm.
Or if I've had a, big training day the day before, I might sleep in until about 7. But I naturally wake up around that time. And then, talk about morning routines, like super important. Um, and everybody has a morning routine, even if
Mhm.
you think you don't. Like
Yeah, I know, right.
what you do in the morning is your morning routine.
Yeah.
Um,
Good or bad, they're
yeah.
yeah.
But, I mean, wake up, have some, same thing as you, like, have a tall glass of water with some electrolytes.
Yeah, first thing.
Yep, I use, Redmond Relight
Nice.
electrolytes.
I'm thinking about switching over. And
Yeah.
unless Element wants to give me a sponsorship on this podcast.
Well, to be honest, so out of all the electrolytes I've tried, those 2 companies, LMNT and
Mhm,
Redmond, are the
mhm,
only 2 that do it right. Like,
right. Yeah,
clean ingredients,
good
like,
stuff.
nothing.
Yeah, you get your magnesium in there, your sodium, and it's, like, portioned out perfectly,
Yeah.
potassium, yeah, it's great.
But have a glass of water and then have a coffee, and that's, if I'm waking up with Sarah, I have a coffee with her, share the morning with her, and then usually my day will be, I've got a run on the calendar, so that'll be the next priority is, getting out the door for the run, getting things ready for that if it's a
Yeah,
long run in terms of gear, nutrition. And then I'll go do that run, and then I usually carve out every day at lunch, to spend time with Sarah again. She'll come home from work, and her and I will have lunch together, we'll share that,
that's awesome.
and then once she heads back to work for the afternoon, that's when I'll begin my, like, coaching work and things like that I've gotta take care of. Mondays are a little bit different than any other day of the week, but for the most part, that's kinda the flow. And then, you know, the end of the day comes in, like, we're both finished up with work. We'll usually go to the gym together, do our separate workouts, but we'll usually go together and then, come back from that, have some dinner, and then rinse and repeat and
Yeah.
do that the next day.
In the mornings, do you tend to eat large breakfast, or you kinda keep it pretty light, or
I in the mornings, like, my appetite's usually suppressed a bit, and I used to, do intermittent fasting and not have
Yeah,
breakfast, but with the
same.
training volume that I've got
Yeah,
now, it
you
just
gotta
doesn't
fuel.
work.
Yeah,
So if, I'll have usually if I'm doing a big run, I'll have, bowl of oatmeal or
okay.
bowl of, you know bowl of oatmeal or something with a banana, and then I'll go out for my run and then fuel on the run. Sometimes if I'm doing like a smaller run, I might have something lighter, like just a banana. It really depends on the day, but I'm usually always getting something in before the run, and it's very, very rarely that I ever go out and run fasted anymore. And if I do, I'm making sure I'm definitely on top of fueling during that run, and taking in the calories during the run.
Let me ask you too, what's your approach with caffeine? Do you use it as a tool in your races? Do you drink caffeine every day? How much do you kind of do you have a regimen? It's
Yeah,
just a fascinating topic because I know some people don't do caffeine at all. Some people love caffeine; they're fueled on it. Obviously, the world at large drinks coffee every day, but
yeah.
I'm kind of back and forth on this, so I just kind of would like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I have a coffee every morning.
Mm,
Maybe once in a blue moon, I'll skip it for a few days, kind of like
yeah,
the adenosine receptors reset and everything. But for the most part,
adenosine receptors. Is
yeah. So
that what you said?
coffee, the way
Right.
caffeine works is it blocks adenosine, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so adenosine is kind of like you can think of like sleep pressure building up. And
Right.
so adenosine will block those receptors or I mean, sorry,
Coffee.
caffeine will block those receptors so you don't feel tired. Like your body still needs the sleep, still
Right.
needs the rest, but it kind of blocks that feeling temporarily.
Right.
But aside the point, yeah, so I'll have a coffee every morning, and then some mornings I'll have a second coffee.
Mm,
But for the most part, that's the caffeine intake that I have throughout the day is just the 1 cup of coffee in
that's
the
it.
morning, maybe a second cup. Um,
Even in races, you're not taking.
that's where it gets different,
Okay.
right? So, um, in the past, I'd never actually used caffeine for races except for later in Cocodona on like night 2, night 3, I had it
Yeah.
a little bit and I was like, this is great. Why haven't I done this before? Um, but this last race, Canyons, I was actually going to try it out at Lake Sonoma, but
Mhm.
that got
Yeah, it got
canceled
canceled, yeah.
before the
Right.
nighttime came.
Right.
So, this last race was my first chance to actually implement a full caffeine regimen over the course of the night, and I took about 100 milligram caffeine gel every hour or 2 hours throughout the night, and there was not a point in this race where I felt sleepy. Um,
This was the current race?
yep, the
Okay.
race I just did last
When did
week.
you start taking that caffeine at nighttime?
Yep, so I started taking it right around 9, 10 o'clock when I'd usually go to sleep,
Okay.
right? I found in previous races that get tired at that time because that's when I'm usually
Yeah.
going to sleep.
Yeah, right, same.
And I would say, 100 milligrams of caffeine in a long race, like a 100 miler like that, every 2 to 3 hours
Mm,
when you're tired, right?
when you're
So
tired.
don't start using caffeine early in the race or don't start
Right.
using it if you don't need it, but when you're tired or if you need it, then it makes sense. And then if it's like a shorter race, there's caffeine is a ergogenic aid, so that means it helps with athletic performance. And so
Mhm.
a shorter race like a 50K, for instance, even if you're not tired, you can still use caffeine as an energy boost and as an ergogenic aid. And so at that point, I would say you could probably take it once every hour or a little bit more frequently than in a long race, right?
So at 9 o'clock at the race, you took it in a gel?
Yep. So
So
this
so it was a calorie gel, basically like a regular gel, but it just had caffeine milligrams of caffeine. How many milligrams? 100, you said?
yep. So it
Okay.
had 100 milligrams of
Okay.
caffeine, 30 grams of carbohydrate,
Right.
and then I take that because I'm feeling with gels during this race, gels and fluids, and so I take that caffeine gel in place of like just a normal one I'd take, and then maybe the next hour I would do it again, or I'd wait another hour and then take a caffeine gel. So just kind of play it by feel over the course of the night.
Gotcha.
Um, and then that's kind of the approach I think I'm going to have with all future races that run through
Mm.
the night is play it by feel, utilize it when needed, and then some of those multi-day races, if it is like middle of the day and I'm needing a boost, like I'm starting to get real sleepy, then use it at that point.
Wow. And then there's pretty much a cutoff, right? Like, I mean, if you're running a 100 miler and you're probably looking to run all the way into the morning time,
Mhm.
you're not hitting caffeine at like 3 or 4 in the morning, are you?
No, so I think I stopped taking the caffeine once the sun came up, right? So, that one since it started at noon and I finished in I think 25 hours and some change, so I finished around 1 or 2 p.m. the next day.
Yeah.
And so I just used caffeine through the night, right?
Okay.
Once the sun came back up, stop using caffeine and then, because you don't want to overdo it, right? You
Right.
don't want to like 100 milligrams of caffeine every couple hours is quite a bit,
And
especially.
you're also drinking water while you're doing this. It's not like you're because obviously caffeine can dehydrate you really fast and deplete you of nutrients.
Yeah, so I mean, caffeine can act as a diuretic, but as long as you're hydrating, then
You're good.
that's not a concern. Many athletes have used caffeine in terms of, performance enhancement, and as long as you're hydrating properly, like what's going to get you in a issue with hydration is not hydrating properly. It's
Hmm.
not the caffeine side
Right.
of things.
Yeah, it's like even the average coffee drinker out there, that drinks coffee every day. It's like, man, if you just wake up and have your water first before your coffee, it's a game changer.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
I mean, I'm not even saying if you're an athlete or if you're a runner or anything, but just like if you're a regular, I drink coffee and work 9 to 5 and I'm behind a desk or whatever you're doing. If you wake up and your first thing is not just to brew the coffee and drink the coffee, but to actually get some water and with electrolytes, like 16 ounces, 20 ounces, or whatever,
mhm.
and then get your coffee, that coffee is gonna elevate you. It's a way different
Well, and
game.
you're waking up. Everybody wakes up dehydrated.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
you know, imagine like waking up, having a cup of coffee
Right.
and maybe a little bit of a breakfast, and then going out to start a run. Or if you're skipping breakfast and then just having coffee and going out for a run.
Yeah.
So now you're starting that run dehydrated and
Yeah.
underfueled.
Totally.
And it's like, yeah, if you can knock out the hydration first thing in the morning and get yourself back up to like a good hydration status, then the rest of your days, yeah, like you said, it's gonna go
Yeah.
so much better.
I think another game changer for me that I found later on in my life now is, just like I used to eat late too before bed. Like I would eat, or even when I was a drinker, I haven't been a drinker for 6 years now, but like I would have a beer at like 10 o'clock, or I'd have something to eat at like 10 o'clock and then just try to fall asleep because I was, I'm full. I'm just ready to sleep. And that's such a recipe for disaster as you get older because you're really what I do is I stop my eating window ends at 8 p.m. Whether I'm intermittent fasting or not doesn't matter. I don't eat after 8 because I go to bed. I want to be asleep by 10. So I give myself that 2 hours of grace where I'm just not eating food. I might drink water, but no food, nothing like that, no snack. I might have a snack right at 8, but after 8 o'clock, it's no food. And then I get to lay down, fall asleep great, and I wake up and I'm not like, because the problem is like people go to bed with a full belly like that, and then while your body's sleeping, it's breaking down all that food, so it's doing work when it should be resting.
Mhm.
Their organs should be resting. Instead, they're doing all this work, and then like you said, you wake up in the morning, you're super dehydrated. You don't even hit the water; you hit right to the coffee. It's like a cycle, and
Yeah.
then you're finding you're not getting quality sleep, and you're always in the fog, and you're just kind of like as you age with that kind of lifestyle, you just become this like you become lethargic, and like 2 o'clock rolls around the afternoon, you got no energy, and you're like going for that next cup, and it's like
Mhm.
that's where caffeine can be really detrimental, I think, to the
Yeah.
body.
Well, just you mentioning that whole eating right before you go to bed thing, it reminded me of another facet of like wildland firefighting.
Oh,
So when you're on a hotshot crew, you wake up at 6, go to chow line, get breakfast, and then you're out working all day for like a 16-hour shift.
yeah,
You have lunch and some snacks like throughout the day, and then as soon as you finish that shift, you come back, you eat a bunch of food for dinner, and you go right to sleep because
yeah,
like that sleep is super important. And so doing that for so many years, it like trained me to like be able to sleep with a full belly, but I know that that's not like ideal. And yeah, I don't do that anymore by choice. Like I similar to you, I stop eating a few hours before I go to bed. And if I do have anything, it's something light, like maybe a little protein drink or
yeah, totally.
something very light that is not going to affect that sleep.
What's interesting about the protein thing? I just saw a couple of studies were done that says your body can actually take protein overnight. That
Yes.
there's been a bunch of studies coming out lately that if you take protein at like 8 o'clock or right before bed or 9 o'clock, whatever, and you go to bed with the protein in your system, it actually breaks down. It does the job while you
Mhm.
sleep. So you can actually take in protein while you sleep. So you wake up, and your first thing is usually you drink your water, your coffee, but you go work out like I do early. That protein's kicking in at that time, and that's like fascinating to see. So you can actually do some really good work
Yeah, it's
with
just a
protein.
matter of that balance of like striking the balance, like making sure you're not having so much that it is affecting your sleep.
Right, right.
But yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Like, having some protein. I think I've seen the similar study that just came out a handful of weeks ago,
yeah,
where yeah, having it right before bed.
right.
Um, it,
Well, it's the same thing with creatine too. Like, I think a lot of people think when they get into fitness and nutrition and everything, and they're just starting out, they're like, "Oh, I gotta overload on the protein, overload on the creatine, and get it going." Everybody's in a fast food culture, and that's not the way to do it. There's literally barely. I don't. I've not read one study that says creatine's bad for you or protein's bad for you. But if you obviously if you overdo it, yes. So that's what a lot of people's fear is like, oh well, creatine can be terrible on your kidneys. Yeah, if you're overloading it. Nowhere is any professional going to tell you that you should be, loading on creatine in the beginning. That's just that's a myth. I don't know why people believe that. That's totally inaccurate. And a lot of people do it. They're because we live again. We live. I feel like we live in this culture where everyone's like it's fast food culture. Everything. I want instant results now. I want muscle tomorrow. And that's just not how it works. This is a
mhm.
long game. Just running, exercising, if you're bodybuilding, whatever you're doing, it's a long game. It's not. There's no such thing as 30-day abs. There's no such thing as these things don't exist. Like we got to stop that culture and start realizing and focusing on what does work. And I just think it's important to lay it out over time and take in your protein where you can get it. I personally, it was a slow build. Like realized I'm not getting enough protein, so I started working on that and tracking my food and my intake and everything with nutrition. Um, but like now I take in I weigh 163 pounds, so I'll take in almost my body weight in protein. But for a while it was less,
Mhm.
I'm okay with if I don't always get those goals, it's okay. I'm not forcing down a bunch of protein at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night because I didn't reach that goal. That's just not the way to do it. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think that that's the way to do it.
Well, that's one of my favorite sayings is perfection's the enemy of consistency.
Mm,
And so if you try to be perfect with all these facets of life, if you try to be perfect with your diet, you try to be perfect with your training, then you're never going to be consistent with it.
totally.
Right? Like it's okay to miss a day here or there. It's okay to, not hit your protein for the day, that's fine. Like as long as you're consistently aiming for those things, like that's where the true progress comes from.
Dude, that's absolutely 100%. So I'm going to pivot one more time here. So we're going to talk about big race you got coming up. This is pretty awesome. So you have some pretty big goals coming up in June. We got what, a month to go?
Yeah.
About 30 days to go, a little more than 30 days to go until you run the Tahoe 200.
Yes.
So I went out running with you about a month or so ago. We were talking about it, and you're not only trying to win this thing, you're trying to break a course record. That's your goal, huh?
So, I mean, that would be great, right? I
Uh-huh.
don't wanna I don't
Yeah.
wanna do the same thing that I did the
Right,
last
right,
race
right.
where I start this race and I'm like, "That's what I'm
Yeah.
aiming for."
Right.
Um, I think with depending on, how things go, I think it's within my capability to break the current course record.
That's awesome.
That's not what I'm gonna be thinking when I'm at the start
Yeah,
line of the race, though.
of
I'm
course.
gonna I'm gonna be aiming for somewhere in that 50 to 60-hour range.
Okay.
Just gonna let my body do its thing, see how the race comes to me, and then once I get beyond like mile 100, once I get into that second half of the race, if I've got energy in the tank and I'm feeling good, that's where I'm gonna try to push it. Um, and so, yes, that would be the most ideal setting would be grace, course
Mhm.
record, but um, that's kind of one of those things where everything needs to fall in line in order for
Right.
that to happen. And so I'm not banking on that. That is a thought, but I'm kind of pushing that as like a thought to the distance, right?
Yeah.
Um, the main goal for this race, coming off of canyons, where I finished the race and I had a good time. I learned a lot of lessons in that race. The main goal for Tahoe, when I am on that start line, is going to be to run a strong race.
Right.
And if I run a strong race and I finish in 65 hours, I'll be happy. If I
Sure.
run a strong race and I finish in 50 hours, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it depends on who else is there and how everybody else's race is going on where you end up in that, like,
Right.
whether you get podium, top 10, any of that stuff.
Sure.
Like, it depends on a lot of factors. So I'm just gonna approach it, go run my race, and then as long as I know I've performed a good race,
Yeah.
wherever I end up, I'll be pretty happy with.
I think something you said to me recently when we were out running is since you have transitioned from firefighting into running, you feel like this is your window and your opportunity of time, your age, where you're at and running, where your fitness is. That this is your you have, ultra running is can be a long career, obviously, but you really have a good base fitness level where you're at, your age, everything like that, to where you can actually really compete in these ultras, and that's what you're basically setting out to do. You're just trying to really compete.
Yeah,
However that shakes out, it shakes out. But like,
exactly.
this is your chance to really,
Yeah, and
go
and
for it.
it's interesting because like, over the decade of firefighting, I was running the whole time, but very inconsistently, right? In the middle of
Mm,
summer, like, you're gone so much that it's really difficult, so it's like you have these
right.
summers where you're kinda losing fitness actually, and then you're building it back up in the winter,
Sure.
and so, this year will be the first year which I don't have huge expectations for this year, but this is the first year I'll be able to train consistently the whole year through, and so, I'm really excited about the next few years to come and where my fitness and where my racing comes, because being able to train consistently like that is gonna be night and day difference in terms of the progress
Yeah.
versus, like, having each summer where I'm kinda losing fitness while firefighting.
Man, that's a lot, yeah, and you have that window, so, like, I had, Aaron Stacy on here last week, and we were talking about the differences between, him being a father of 5 and having all these responsibilities and all these things in his life, and, we're both 47, so it's like, it's a totally different window, so, like, when you have that opportunity to really just compete on that level, why wouldn't you go for it? I mean, this is awesome. It's truly amazing that you have this chance, and be grateful for it just to get out there and crush. Um, and so when you did, Cocodona, was Sarah your only crew? That was it?
No,
Or
so
did you have some
I
pacers?
had Sarah and my mom,
Okay,
and so they were crewing
okay.
me, and then Sarah paced me each night for a, 20-mile section. So she
Dang,
ended up doing
awesome.
60 miles over the
Hell
week,
yeah.
which being crew is really difficult. Being a crew and a pacer at the same
Yeah,
time is even
that's
even more
insane.
difficult.
Yeah.
And so my mom and Sarah were there for that, and then Sarah's been my crew pretty much for every race since then, and, most races I don't have pacers, it's just like,
Yeah.
Sarah's out there, crewing me. When I come into the aid station, she'll help me out, and then I'll just kinda go on my way. Um
So Tahoe's a little different. You have a team.
Yeah, a small team,
Okay.
you don't want too many hands in the pot, right?
Right, right,
Things get a little bit
right.
convoluted, but again, Sarah will be my crew, and then I've got, around 2 to 4 pacers, depending on some things, like, one guy that I was talking to the other day, he pulled back, had a hamstring injury, and so he
Ooh,
doesn't
yeah,
think he can
yeah,
do it, so, that part's a little flexible on the pacing side of things, but Sarah will be the primary crew,
right.
and then whatever other help she can get.
So not only are you putting yourself out there to run 250 miles, but you kinda have to direct your team on how you wanna do it, come up with a strategy accordingly, and just like, if you were the coach of a basketball team, somebody gets injured, now you gotta find a replacement or do this or that, or, who knows, last minute what could happen,
Yeah.
change course a little bit.
And, like, as the runner, my job's to be flexible with everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, things happen with pacing, things happen with crews, like, sometimes, it's happened where people have gotten a flat tire, Cocodona, for instance, there's this one aid station, Walnut Canyon, and one of the vans, who was a crew van for someone, poor runner, they, their gas tank got ripped out on a rock, like, going out this
Oh,
dirt
no.
road, so, like, anything can happen, right? And so
Yeah.
that runner probably didn't have crew for that aid station, which, you gotta be prepared for
Yeah, yeah, wow,
any of
wow.
these things because you don't know what's gonna happen.
Oh, what a bummer to show up and be like, "Oh, help,
Yeah, and
I'm
if you're 100% reliant on that, like, if you're 100% reliant on a pacer to be there and then they're not there,
Yeah,
you have some problems, like, you need to be ready
sure.
to run the race without pacers, to run the race without crew if you had to.
Yeah, that's something.
But having pacers and having crew, like, it is a world of difference in terms of your ability to get through aid stations efficiently and then move efficiently on the course,
Right.
especially, like, with
And
the
I would
sleep.
also think, like, a lot of that really affects your mindset. Like, if your mind is kinda, like, thinking, "Okay, I'm coming up on this aid station, I'm gonna see my crew. I haven't seen a crew or aid person in 20 miles," or whatever. I get here and it's not there, and I have to adjust, and that's a total mindset shift. And, I would think that also with the pacers and the people on your crew, they're not only there to, support you, but they're also there to, like, keep your head about you and, keep your energy and spirits up, right? You
Yeah,
think that that's part of it
absolutely.
too, not just the running, but, like, actually, like, "Hey, man, how you doing?" Checking in, making
Yeah.
sure you're good.
Yeah, I mean, all that, keeping the positive attitude, especially in these 200s where there's multiple nights and you're getting more and more sleep deprived as the race
Mm,
goes on. Like having somebody there, just making sure you're going the right way, staying on the right path. Like
yeah.
one thing I realized from Cocodona, during some of those sections where Sarah was pacing me, and I could just like close off my thinking to everything and just like focus on following her feet. Like
Hmm,
even like where you're stepping on the trail, right? Like whether it's like
yeah.
rockier over here and smoother over here, like I could just follow her feet. And that was such a mental reprieve versus like when
Mm,
you're out there solo and you're like having to navigate all these things and look at course markers and making sure you're on the right, the right path. Like, you should be doing that regardless of if you have a pace or not, but it allows you to like pull back a little bit and get that mental reprieve,
wow. Yeah.
which is huge,
Yeah.
especially in a race like that.
And like you said too, man, like, with any of these races, us living here in Humboldt, we don't have the vert and the elevation, the climate differences, and all these different factors. Like Tahoe is going to be completely different to run in versus
Mhm.
Humboldt County at sea level and stuff in sea air. And so, are you going to get up to Tahoe a little early and do a couple of shakeout runs, or what's your strategy there?
Yeah, so I mean, I was born and raised in Reno,
Oh, right, yeah.
so I'm pretty familiar with all those trails up there.
Hmm.
It's been a while since I've been running anything in Tahoe, but next week, actually, I'm gonna head up there, for a training camp, go explore some of the course for 3 or 4 days, put a lot of mileage on my feet, just seeing some of the course, and then it'll give me a chance to, because it's been, I think, 3 years since I lived there,
Mm,
so it'll give me a chance to see how it feels now after living at sea level for 3 years, right? Because I'm used
yeah.
to every time I've ran up there, it's been when I lived there, and so now, so it'll give me a chance to see that, and then as the race approaches, I think I'm gonna head out there a week early, get out there, by then I'll be kind of tapering, and so my training will
Mm,
be winding down. I'll get out on the trail and run a little bit here and there, but that'll give my body a little bit of chance to
acclimation
to
and stuff.
acclimate to the
Mhm,
altitude.
okay.
Obviously, the more the better, especially in terms of altitude. Like getting out 7 to 10 days early isn't going to be huge, but
Right.
the thing with altitude is like as long as you don't show up and then like go race the following day, because like the biggest changes in your body start to happen between like 24 and 72 hours. So
Okay.
you either want to show up and immediately like start the race, like drive in the race morning and start the race, or show up, beyond 4 days early, right?
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Because if you're in that 24 to 72 hour range, that's when all your body's trying to make more red blood cells. It's trying to start that acclimation process, and that's when you'll actually feel the worst.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna try to get that out of the way well before the race starts.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Oh,
So
that's smart. A good strategy there. Yeah, for all those that are running Tahoe. There you go. Um, cool. So Tahoe 200 is June
June
12th,
13th
13th,
through 17th.
13th to the 17th. Yeah, that's going to be a wild race. Crazy, crazy. 200 miler. Is the course changed this year from last year? Is it the same?
It's the
Because
same course. This Caldor fire happened several years ago, and it's
right,
rerouted the course. So it used to be a loop around the
because they were
lake.
talking about maybe not having to reroute it this year and going back to the original,
Right.
but then they,
No,
they weren't able to do that.
yeah, the permitting is still it's probably gonna be back to the loop next year if I had to
Okay.
guess, but
Okay.
there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes I have no
Gotcha.
clue about. But yeah, this year it'll be the same where you start at Heavenly Lodge, and then you run 50K up Armstrong Pass and then over to Housewife Hill, and then you run 50K back. So you're doing like 100K out and back essentially.
Hmm.
And then the rest of the race you run up towards Spooner, Incline Village to Tahoe City and back.
Wow.
So you're kind of running 3/4 of the way around the lake.
And what time does the race start?
That'll be 9 a.m.
Oh,
on
9 a.m. start.
Friday the 13th.
No. Oh, boy, look out. Running around the lake. Friday the 13th. Look out. That's funny. Yeah, that's interesting. So they start at 9, so they kinda give you a chance to wake up in the morning and fuel and do everything you need to do and get
Yeah.
yourself ready and not just like, some of these races, these 100 milers or whatever, even 100Ks, it's like a 5 AM start, 6 AM start. You like wake up at 2 or 3.
Yeah,
It's
it's rough
funny.
at the canyons. At least the 100 miler I did, it started at noon, which is an
Hmm.
odd time. I've never had that
Yeah,
before.
interesting.
But the 100K, which started the next day, was a 5 AM start, and they have to get on a shuttle 2 hours early, so they had to get up and
Oh
get on a
god.
shuttle at 3 AM in Auburn to get up to
Ugh.
the start line.
Yeah.
It's yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, even Lake Sonoma was so interesting because it's like, well, obviously the weather was terrible, but like sleeping in the parking lot right before the start, and then like, it's like quiet at 2, and then 2:30, then 3. It's just like people are starting to get up and do their little things and go to then the porta potty starts to get a line, and by 4 there's blaring music and everyone's partying. It's like 4 in the morning and dark, and then 5 you're off, man, and that's
Yeah.
that. Yeah, pretty wild.
No, I prefer the morning start though, whether it's, 5, 9, whatever,
Mhm.
like anything in the morning, because that's when I typically go run is like
Yeah,
first thing in the morning.
totally.
I've done a race that was a 6 PM start, which was
Oh,
really
weird.
odd.
Yeah.
Because then it's like you're starting the race and like it's nighttime.
Yeah, you
And
just
then
run through the night.
but the one thing I'd have to say about the noon start that I had over at Canyons is, you know, usually like in a 100-mile race, the toughest miles are like between 60 and 80, right? Because you've gone so far, but you have so far to go
Yeah,
still,
totally.
right? Like beyond 80, it's like, okay, you're closing in on the finish, and before 60, like you're still early in the race. But like that 60 to 80 is rough. And
Yeah.
that usually at like a 9 AM or 5 AM start, that usually falls in the middle of the night, like 2, 3 AM, which that's,
Hmm.
if you think about it, people have stayed up late, New Year's, everyone's used to staying up till like midnight for New Year's,
Sure.
or like, and people have had to get up early, like 3, 4 AM before to do something. But like
Mhm.
most everyone's asleep between like 2 and 3 in the
Right,
morning.
right.
And so you're hitting that like that time of night when you're also in the most difficult part of the race,
Yeah.
which with the noon start that I had in Canyons, by the time you're hitting that point in the race, like it's much later, because
Wow.
it's instead of a 5 AM start. So
That's
it was
so weird.
interesting.
So weird. Well, cool, man. It's great catching up with you, and as always. And so let's talk about how can people find you and your run coaching. What's the best ways?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, 3000 or 3KFT coaching, 3000 feet coaching is the Instagram.
3KFT coaching
And then
on Instagram.
my personal Instagram's at a Newblom. Website 3000feetcoaching.com. You can read all about the coaching services, and you can schedule a free onboarding call or free interest call
Mm-hmm.
to just chat back and forth and see if I'd be the right coach for you.
Right.
Yeah, plenty of ways to get a hold of me, and then I do give a 20% discount to military,
Oh,
first responders, firefighters, any of the such, just as a
awesome.
thank you for their service. So,
That's awesome. And it's like monthly coaching, basically.
yep,
And you use Training Peaks as the app, which I think is awesome.
yep. Use Training Peaks. Yeah, Training Peaks is a great app in terms of being able to analyze the run data, the heart rate, the power, the pace, like all those
Hmm.
numbers, being able to communicate with the athletes, and then just in terms of scheduling the
Yeah,
plan.
and your communication is great. Like we get video. I'm one of Austin's clients, and like every Sunday we'll get our recap videos and just to recap the week, and we're filling out what went right, what went wrong, all those kinds of things. Just constant communication is key with you, and I find that really refreshing. Keeps everybody on point. And you just you go through the program and you get better, and it's good to have somebody to coach you and to help you along. It's so important.
Yep.
So I encourage everybody out there that's listening or watching, and you're thinking about getting into running, get a coach and be coachable and learn and grow, because you're also adding nutrition plans in there as well, and
Yeah.
how to fuel and everything we just talked about, which is
Yeah.
cool. They're not just for ultra runners, for runners, just in
Yes.
general,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, all these things, like they're super important parts of performance
Mhm.
and super important parts of training and adaptation. And so, I can program strength training. I typically don't.
Mhm.
I typically just give some recommendations with it. Nutrition plans, I get people, full like race day nutrition plan ready. And so any of the such, yeah, anything to get ready for an ultra marathon, which all that stuff still applies to races that are smaller
Sure.
than it. So
Sure, yeah. If you want to crush a 5K, 10K, a half marathon, I know a lot of people went out and just recently, this yesterday, crushed the Avenue of the Giants. A lot of half marathoners and marathoners out there, and things that can be, I'm not gonna say easy, but they can be easier if you work with a coach and train and work towards your goals. So go check out Austin's page. Go check out his website. Go check out his Instagram. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And yeah, man, anything else you want to say? Anything else you got going on?
No, I mean, yeah, just thanks for having me out here. It's
Of
been
course.
been a pleasure. This studio is pretty sweet, so I'm
Yeah, shout out to Nick.
glad to get to experience it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate you. So that's Austin Newblom. Make sure you check out his pages, his Instagram, his website, and get yourself a coach. And we're looking forward to the journey at Tahoe. We'll have you back after Tahoe. And we'll chat about that as well.
Yeah, that'll be a
Cool,
good
man.
one.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for tuning into the Grit Podcast. New episodes dropping every weekend, hopefully Saturday, sometimes Sunday. We're on Spotify, so you can check it out there. Also on YouTube. And the Grit Podcast is also going to be available on Apple soon. I'm working that out. So thanks to my guest, Austin Newblom, and thanks for Nick out there doing the work. And we'll see you guys soon. All right, take care.